Yeah, that's really helpful. And again, I have a syllogistic, the syllogistic version of Hume's argument against miracles that you present in your book. But I think it'd be good. I mean, I can pull that up when you begin to answer this if it will be helpful. But I think it'd be good to kind of try and bottom out kind of precisely what Hume's trying to accomplish in his argument against miracles. Like, is he trying to
Yeah.
accomplish or claim that miracles never actually happen, or is he concerned with challenging the reliability of religious testimony regarding miracles? I don't know. Could you kind of clarify the target of his critique?
Yeah, and this is important. Just what exactly is Hume trying to prove with this argument? And one thing, it is often referred to as Hume's argument against miracles, which is a handy title, but it is misleading, I think, because it's not actually in my opinion, it's not actually an argument that miracles don't happen. So I don't think the conclusion is supposed to be miracles never occur or something like that. And so what I think is going on is that Hume is focusing on a very specific kind of testimony, which he calls, or maybe in the book I call it just religious testimony. But roughly, it's the kind of case where someone says, um, "This miracle happened. I observed it, or I heard from someone who observed it, something like that." Uh, and this miracle supports Christianity or Islam, so that it's the person, the testifier, is claiming not just that a miracle happened, but that it supports a particular religious tradition. And I think ultimately what Hume is trying to argue is that as someone encountering or hearing such testimony, it's never going to be reasonable for you to basically accept that testimony as correct. And what's here's why it's not an argument that miracles never occur. I think let's take the big miracle in Christianity, the resurrection of Jesus. One thing that's tricky about Hume's discussion is he never mentions that example, which I think, as you hinted before, is for like political reasons at the time he was writing. So it's a weird, like the whole essay is obviously about that, but he can't talk about that. But that's what he is thinking of. And I think what he's saying is like, suppose for the sake of argument that this miracle actually happened. And but now here we are, hundreds of years later, and we're trying to figure out, um, should we now accept, on the basis of scripture, that this miracle occurred? And Hume is saying, even if it did happen, it's not going to be reasonable for us to think that it did happen. And let me try to, yeah, rather than the syllogism, let me try to just kind of explain this maybe in a more intuitive fashion. So let's go back to this probability principle. I think here is my attempt to get to the core of what Hume is trying to say. He's saying, okay, let's take this situation. We've got testimony that Jesus was raised from the dead, and now Hume says, okay, let's consider um, relevant past experience. And his claim is, on the one hand, we've got all these cases of people claiming to have experienced miracles and claiming that these miracles support a certain religious tradition. Uh, and Hume says, like, most of those have to be false because just because they conflict with one another. And so we've got all, that's one type of uh, here's a type of thing that's very common according to Hume. Someone says they witnessed a miracle and that it supports such and such religion, and they're either lying or just mistaken. That happens all the time, says Hume. And I think one strength of his essay is he gets into the psychology of human being. Like, we love good stories and various kinds of motivation. And so it's not surprising, given human beings, that would be a thing that happens a lot. Okay, so that's one thing. And then it's like, okay, so one possibility is that this testimony about Jesus being raised from the dead is one of those cases, that we've, of the kind of thing that we've that happens all the time. Or the other possibility, of course, is that Jesus actually was raised from the dead. And there Hume's point is simply like, we don't have experience of people being raised from the dead. And so when you put it all together, he says the reasonable conclusion has got to be that it's probably just another case of false testimony. And again, it's like, it doesn't mean that the miracle didn't happen. Maybe it did. It just can't. We're kind of stuck. even if it did happen, it can't be reasonable for us now to conclude that it did on the basis of this kind of testimony, because this testimony is just sort of notoriously unreliable. So to me, I think that's kind of the core of Hume's argument.
It's really interesting. I mean, I've said before on other podcasts and probably this podcast a few times as well that, the supernatural miracles could easily be plugged in more intuitively and more obviously. Like, we could still have the supernatural and miracles occurring, but it being more observable, more coherent, more uniformed. An example that I've used before is, say that anybody that has cancer who walks under the arches of a church, pick your denomination, I don't really care, is instantly cured from cancer. That would be miraculous, and also it would strongly hint that there's something true that's going on in that space. And when you begin to see that and you can accumulate evidence for that thing occurring, it doesn't lose its miraculous and supernatural power, but it begins to allow you to actually go, okay, these miracles that are being claimed to take place are things that we can verify, and therefore things that we can potentially accept. So I think that kind of feeds into this conversation quite well. If you enjoyed this clip, head on over to Locals to watch the full conversation right now. Supporters can access the video version, and everyone can freely listen to the audio-only version of the conversation. If you're on YouTube or Rumble, please like, subscribe, and then hit the bell notification icon so you never miss a new episode. I'll catch you next time. Cheers.